It can feel like a miracle when the musical you've been writing finally makes it to a world premiere. But what a lot of people don't see is the hard work and collaboration that went into that musical. In my last video, I shared where the idea for my latest musical, Happy Pleasant Valley, came from, but how did that spark lead to a full production? Well, it started years earlier with my previous full-length musical, The Four Immigrants, and its premiere at TheatreWorks Silicon Valley. Now, there's a whole story that I could tell here, and maybe I will in a future video, but I'll just say that me being able to have The Four Immigrants premiere at TheatreWorks is what opened the door for Happy Pleasant Valley to come to fruition. Because of my existing relationship with them, I was invited to a TheatreWorks Writers Retreat in early 2019, and they asked if I had any ideas that I would like to develop, and I talked about my idea for Happy Pleasant Valley. Not sure if they would be open to it, but they were. They said go for it. And that retreat is where I wrote the first 2 scenes and first 2 songs of the show and was able to present it before an invited audience, mostly of fans and donors of TheatreWorks. And it got a pretty exciting, positive reaction. I don't think they were necessarily expecting that show from me. My previous show was about Japanese immigrants coming to the United States at the turn of the 20th century. And while that show had humor, it definitely wasn't the more outlandish style of humor that I was displaying in Happy Pleasant Valley. But I think that exciting reception from that invited audience is what led to TheatreWorks ultimately turning Happy Pleasant Valley into a commission. And having a theater company commission a project that you're working on, especially one that was your idea and they're not asking you to fit certain constraints, that is such a godsend. They're basically supporting you through your writing process. For some theater companies, that just means financial support. But for others, and for TheatreWorks, this was the case. It was financial support as well as development infrastructure. So what that meant was when I needed to do a workshop of the piece, they were there to support it. Now, the first workshop that we were able to have for Happy Pleasant Valley was in late 2019, and I had really only written Act 1. I had no idea who the killer was, where the show was necessarily going to go, and when I look back on what that script was compared to what it became, it was a wildly different show. The main characters are more or less pretty much there, but a lot of the side characters had not been fully fleshed out by that point. And I tip my hat to mystery writers because the chicken and egg scenarios I found myself in of needing to come up with clues but wanting to make sure the clues actually led to a killer and knowing how that infrastructure worked, it was way more complicated than I could have imagined. So I was so grateful that I was even given a chance to just explore what I had written of Act 1 that early on. And then came 2020, and the pandemic hit, and everything came to a stop. However, I am so grateful because TheatreWorks offered me an online workshop. They were telling me they were still invested in developing this piece and helping it come to fruition. And by 2021, I had written about 2/3 of the script, stopping short just before the main character solves the mystery. And we were able to do a Zoom reading. We weren't able to hear all the songs because it was a Zoom musical reading, but I was able to think about the character intricacies and the new material, the new clues that I had planted along the way. And then finally, as theater companies were coming back and figuring out what their practices were around COVID, TheatreWorks supported a workshop in 2022 after I had finally finished a full first draft. Now that was exciting because I had decided who the killer was and I had decided how the emotional arcs of the main characters were going to go. And we performed this reading for an invited audience again. And their response was so energetic and enthusiastic, and I felt like I was on the right track with the piece. Now, TheatreWorks has this amazing infrastructure for developing new works because they have the New Works Festival, and my piece was invited to be a part of the 2023 New Works Festival, where I got 3 staged readings before live audiences, something that is so invaluable because you can get real-time feedback from these audiences, make changes between readings, and then present it again. And by the end of that festival, I felt I had a really solid sense of what the musical was. Now, of course, there was always room for changes, and I made some more changes, but I think how Happy Pleasant Valley landed at that festival is what ultimately led to it being programmed as part of the 2025 season at TheaterWorks. And then along the way, another theater company, Center Repertory Company, stepped in and decided to co-produce the world premiere. So even after the first production happened, I still had an opportunity to go back and make some revisions for the second production. So how does a musical grow from a few scenes and songs into a full-fledged musical? Well, it takes a lot of support from other people, and it takes continuing on even if the ending is not in sight, both the ending of your actual show and the end point of the production because a giant pandemic hit. Now in my next video, I'll share some big lessons that I learned once we reached production. But until then, please feel free to ask me any questions you might have about the development of HPV. And yes, that was the abbreviation we used to refer to the show. It made for a lot of fun times in meetings. I'll do what I can to answer them, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.